even before COVID-19, Abu Dhabi was already leading regional efforts to encourage private sector participation and foreign investment in the economy. In February this year, the Abu Dhabi Investment Office announced that it planned to issue around 10 billion dirhams worth of PPP tenders as part of its Gadan 21 accelerator program. This follows the introduction in 2019 of new measures to regulate partnerships between the private sector and the public sector. I'm delighted to welcome today Mohamed Al-Dhaheri, the head of infrastructure partnerships at the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. Mohamed Al-Dhaheri leads the efforts to increase private sector investment opportunities in Abu Dhabi through public-private partnerships and through the Musataha lend-lease arrangements. Welcome, Mohamed. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I hope that you are well.
Thank you very much, Richard, for this warm welcome. And again, thank you for everyone for tuning in today.
It is great to have you. If we can perhaps just start with a question about Abu Dhabi Investment Office, then can you tell us a little bit about what your role is in developing PPP in Abu Dhabi and why that is such an important part of the program?
Okay, so if we want to talk about the infrastructure partnership unit here we have in Abu Dhabi Investment Office, our role is very, very simple. We facilitate the PPP projects for all the government entities. So our role is to take the project from the initiation phase with the government entity all the way to the financial closure. Our role is to make sure that we follow a very transparent process that everyone can see and understand, that we give a fair opportunity for everyone to come and invest in Abu Dhabi. Again, our role is mainly focused on facilitation to actually deliver a PPP project for the private sector, which is actually needed from the government sector.
And so across the MENA region, the World Bank has said there is something like a $100 billion deficit in the funding plans versus the infrastructure requirements across the whole region. So PPP is clearly one of the ways to plug that deficit by bringing in private capital into public sector projects and services. From an investor point of view, and from what you have heard from your potential clients at ADIO, how attractive is infrastructure as an investment opportunity?
Okay, so let's take that question that you just gave me. So PPP is definitely another procurement tool that the government can use to actually deliver a project. And to be honest, the benefits of PPP does actually come for both the private sector and also the government sector. Because we're just starting now, and we're focusing on bringing as much projects possible and more investors to Abu Dhabi. Because again, PPP is more about risk allocation, and we're trying to structure the deals in a way that we define the risk in a way that people will be interested to come and invest. So we think that most of our projects at the moment will be on availability payment basis, and we'll be focusing more on social infrastructure like schools, roads, hospitals, stuff like that. And based on the availability basis regime, we think that an appropriate return will be between 8 to 12% on most of these projects.
And so, over the past 2 or 3 decades, ADWIA and other entities across the GCC, they've had a lot of success using public finance or private finance for public power projects and independent water and power projects. It hasn't translated so easily into the social infrastructure or the transport infrastructure sector. It's more difficult to provide sovereign guarantees for energy offtake and things like that. So what are the challenges? You mentioned just now schools and social infrastructure projects as the kind of focus area. What are the challenges for you to create packages that are attractive to private investors?
So I completely agree with you, as you said, that most of the GCC and our neighbors here are very kind of advanced in the IWPP. And the issue, and I wouldn't say an issue, but actually, if you look at it, there were some successful projects that were delivered here in Abu Dhabi and also in the GCC that are other than the IWPP kind of focused and utility focused project. But one of the main challenges that we found is that the lack of a framework that kind of governs the whole thing together. What we have done now in Abu Dhabi Investment Office and in Abu Dhabi is that we have defined that framework. We have a law that governs the whole thing, then we have a regulation now, and now we have actually just issued our guidebook, which acts as our procurement manual for the PPP project. People can download this procurement manual. They can see all the steps that we will follow, all the stage-gated approach that we have to follow. And again, I think when dealing with the social infrastructure as a whole, it means that you are dealing with different government entities. So a proper buy-in between the centralized unit, which is, let's say, ADIO for our example, with the government entities is very important, because if you don't have the buy-in and the support from the government entities, you cannot deliver a project. And I think the framework that we have in place kind of translate that, because I think we have a proper kind of structure and process that brings the government entity on board, and also any government entity that has any relation, for example, like the Department of Finance, so that we'll be all aware of what projects we're going to actually issue.
And so you mentioned that the Abu Dhabi has introduced the PPP law. It has introduced a new regulatory framework last year, and ADIO has recently produced this guidebook. So the role, if I'm correct, is ADIO's role is to make sure that the framework is being utilized, to bring the different stakeholders together within that framework that you just described. That's where ADIO fits in?
So our role is to identify the projects, then we structure the project, then we create the business cases that is associated with the project, we create the tendering documents, we issue the tendering to the investors, we evaluate the submission, we do the negotiation till the financial closure. But again, all of this that I'm saying will be on hand with the government entity that owns the actual project. So we work with the government entities to deliver the project on their behalf.
So ADIO is not the ultimate client. Say, if, for example, if it's a schools project, ADIO will put together the tender, will manage the tender, will facilitate the process, but the end client is the education authority.
Education department, yes, indeed, and they will be eventually signing off with the department. Again, what we do is we do our best to make sure that there is a consistency in the output that we deliver, so that for investors, instead of them finding different output from different departments, they get used to a specific format on all the projects that we do. And on top of that, also, I think even for investors, it's easier for them to go to one location to see the list of projects that are potential and upcoming in the next couple of years. Again, I think one of the most important things we try to focus on is that when we bring projects, we try to bring projects that can actually be bundled in a program, because having a specific project that comes by itself doesn't kind of intrigue the investors. But when I tell them that I have a program of schools, for example, or a program of roads, or a program of, let's say, LED project, street lighting project, then investors will be more kind of interested to come, because they know this is not a one project, it's a continuation of projects with the same output that we had before.
So an investor has the attraction of economies of scale. So if you have a package of schools, it will be multiple schools, and they can have the economies of scale. Can you give me an indication of this, how you size the program? So is it one size fits all? 100 schools and 100 roads, or how will you scale each of those packages?
So we do have our selecting criteria when we look at the projects. And again, one of the main key items that we have in the selecting criteria is actually the possibility of putting it in a program. Again, we look at different aspects such as the capex size of the project. We look at, for example, on the risk allocation, how clear is the scope. So again, we combine all of these different criteria that we have in selecting the project and the program that we want to go forward with.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago, I think I heard you mention that you expect, or investors, developers could look forward to returns of somewhere around 8 to 12%, I think you mentioned. One of the challenges that I've heard about in other markets has been that kind of the commercial case. You know, it's been difficult for investors to evaluate the commercial case for projects. How have you calculated that 8 to 12%? You know, what duration are the concessions, and how do you get that figure?
So again, what did I say before that is that this is on availability payment kind of approach of projects. So the demand risk is not with the investor on these projects. So again, it's more about build and maintain, for example. But again, if it was more of the demand risk was shifted to the investor, then the whole kind of equation will change. There will be, again, with more risk, you get more return. So this is what I'm saying is just because of minimum risk, that kind of, what I say is that the demand risk will not be transferred to the investor on these cases. It's more about having the asset available for the end users and maintaining it in a way. And I think one of the main things that why we do that is usually the investor come with more efficiency in actually delivering the output again. And what we look as I think as a global investment office is that we bring more projects that has more economic impact to the government and have a better output result that will benefit the end users.
Okay, so from ADIO's point of view and from the government's point of view, it's about the service, setting up some key performance indicators for the actual service. And if that service is delivered, then you
get the payment. You can get the payments. And again, it's not only fixed to that, but again, we're just starting. And I think that would be kind of a nice way to start these projects.
Okay, and if I can just ask, how do you select which projects you're going to take forward to the market? Because presumably, every ministry and every government agency will have investment requirements and infrastructure requirements, but not all of them will necessarily work for an investor. The construction risk might be too great, or the commercial risk might be too difficult. So how do you select what you're going to take forward?
So when we start any project, again, as I mentioned from the beginning, we have a clear criteria that kind of sets the project that we want to take forward. Once we identify a project, then we engage with the procuring entity, which is the government entity. We try to understand as much as we can from what are their needs and the specification. And I think the most important thing that we do is we continuously go and check with the market about these projects. We kind of get a sense of their appetite. And we're not only talking about the investors themselves, but we talk also about the lenders. We see if there's any liquidity issues on such project. Will they be willing to lend on let's say, a specific format or a specific structure of a project? Again, I think our role is very critical because we're trying to collaborate between every government, lenders, and investor to make sure that once we put a project that will go forward into the market, it is something that is kind of acceptable from all parties. And again, the way that we take projects forward is we follow a stage-gated approach where we need specific approvals to go from one stage to the other, which means there is an acceptance from the government entities on any project that goes forward to the tendering phase.
Okay, now public-private partnerships, PPP, that is one of these phrases that gets used a lot, but it actually is a very broad term covering anything that isn't 100% government and anything that isn't 100% private development. So within that spectrum, does ADIO have a particular definition of what is a PPP project? I mean, do you say that it has to have a certain percentage of government involvement and a certain a certain percentage of private involvement? How do you classify like that?
So yeah, again, as you said, PPP is a very wide spectrum here. And people do have different definitions on PPP. And again, I think if you look at it, each project, in our opinion, is unique. So each project will have its own characteristic as it goes forward, and it depends on different factors. So and the only thing that I can say is that when we look at project, we look at it as like an individual project, like a case by case, and then we try to build it from there. Okay,
thank you. Now, two more questions. I've taken a lot of your time today, so thank you for this. Two more questions. One is about the availability of finance. So I guess this is a bit of a can of worms, but there are two thoughts that I have. One is governments can borrow much more efficiently than, or at least at lower cost than private sector borrowers. So why use the private sector? And then the second question, which relates to the same thing, is, you know, with the lower oil prices and the economic slowdown because of COVID, are you concerned that there is a lack of liquidity available for infrastructure investment?
That's actually a very, very good question, Richard. And if you notice that at some point I did mention that what Abu Dhabi or Abu Dhabi Investment Office is focusing is an economical impact to the economy. And how do you do an economical impact is by actually bringing investors and give them an opportunity for new contracts, which are the PPP. These contracts are usually a long-term contract, which means they can work for the concession of, let's say, 30 years, which means jobs have been created, people are engaging, better services produced to the end user. This is why we're focusing on PPP mainly. It's not about the cost of financing. And again, we did, and I did mention just now also that when we engage any project, we do check all the parties, which is government, private, and the financing entities. And based on what we've been engaging with a couple of our projects, they've been very clear that they have the appetite to lend into the short and medium term that on these projects we have actually showed to them. So I think there's, I don't see any issue on that.
Okay, thank you. Now, just a sort of supplementary question on that. Will the government or will Abu Dhabi retain a certain percentage in every PPP, so 5% equity stake, or does the government have no single model for that?
So again, I did mention that we take the project case by case. So the current project that we had been delivered, let's say the LED light, street lighting, there was no government involvement. But maybe on critical projects, the government wants to have a stake. There might be a chance of government owning a stake. But again, it's a case by case and depends on the structure and the current situation that we're in.
Okay, now final question. I want to look forward to 2021. So a lot of, you know, investors and contractors and people are finding life difficult at the moment, and they're looking forward to 2021 just to get out of this year. What is your program for 2021? Do you have a visibility yet of a pipeline of tenders for the next 12 months?
I think within the end of this year, we will have a very clear visibility on the projects. We are working on a couple of different sectors as we speak. And ultimately, we will reach a point where all of our projects program will be available. People can see, and then they can tell when is the tendering going to happen on each project. We will do our best to have it as transparent as possible, where you can see each project at which stage it is now in its life cycle. Again, I did mention from the beginning, our role is we want to do this whole process as transparent as possible for all investors.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. You've given very clear descriptions of what your activities are and what your plans are, and I thank you very much for your candor on all of this. I wish you lots and lots of success because it's such an important program, and you know, if there's anything that's going to sort of revive some of the challenges we're facing this year, I think it's PPP. So I wish you lots of success Mohamed Dhaheri, Head of Infrastructure Partnerships at Abu Dhabi Investment Office, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.